Okay, hey YouTube, Todd here again, another video. Today we'll be talking about replacing the end links on a rear, actually front and rear sway bar, specifically on a 2002 Mercury Cougar and a 1998 Ford Contour GL. Of course, that'll apply to all the Ford Contours, the Ford Mondeos sold over in the UK, the Mercury Mystiques, the new Cougars, and basically any car with a front and or rear sway bar. They do have to be connected to the suspension in order to work. So, and these links, they're called end links. They do go bad over time. So this is, and maybe even a preventive maintenance thing if you catch it before they go totally bad, like the one we're looking at here. So, and I'm still experimenting with this kind of more of a slideshow than you trying to watch me fumble around with the camera and trying to find wrenches and all. I think I can just cover more information, better information, and show you really what you need to see. So anyway, here we go. This is the rear sway bar end link off of the Cougar for the driver's side. Okay, so and it's basically an eye bolt, right? There's threads down here. You see the nut. There is a metal sleeve for the mounting bolt for the end of the sway bar. This part from here down goes through the lower control arm, and this is the bushing. There's a bushing here, and these are what fail. And you can see it's not supposed to look like that. I'll show you what it's supposed to look like in just a second. So that is the driver's side. This is the passenger side, okay? And this is where I guess the force, this one on both cars was in much worse shape. I don't have pictures of the Contour, only the Cougar. But the control, the mounting bushing itself just basically fell out. The bushing here that this sleeve is set in is totally gone. And yeah, it is. This one is failing. It's probably really failed, and at this point, this one is totally failed. So this is what a new bushing is supposed to look like. Of course, this is a moved part. Other manufacturers, I think Energy Suspension offers, they may only offer the bushing itself. What I liked about the new product is that it's the entire end link, it's the entire assembly. So this bushing is the mounting bushing, and it's what this and this are supposed to look like. So yeah, you can get a much better idea, just the chafing and the eating away. This bushing and the stud of the end link goes through a mounting hole on top of the lower control arm, and as these bushings dry rot and just degrade over time, that metal to rubber, yeah, it just eats it up. So back to the new part. Nice new shiny part from Moog, and keep in mind the difference upgrade in the actual original piece here. This welded nut that the OEM parts do not have. Now they do have this flattened area here for a wrench to hold them for mounting and dismounting, but this is a nice little upgrade. I thought. Now I'll get to that in the next couple of slides. So nice new part. It's the same part on both cars and on all the cars mentioned. For your specific application, it's probably going to look a little bit different. But yeah, very simple little machine. It's just basically an eye bolt, threads down here, the bushing, the mounting bolt, washer and nut for the sway bar end. The bear of this job is installing this bushing into the mounting point on the lower control arm. This is rubber. It is compressible, but not much. It's a very hard, dense, thick rubber. And the proper install, you see these ridges and valleys here. You have to get the mounting point to the middle, right? So that you have the same bushing material above and below. Now, a word on this. There are, and I'll agree, the best bang for your buck in upgrading your suspension is to use polyurethane bushings. And there are polyurethane, this bushing is available in polyurethane. However, after having done 4 of these now, I don't see you getting a poly bushing, a one-piece polyurethane bushing mounted without a bushing press. I actually used a makeshift bushing press with a 4-inch C-clamp and a socket large enough to fit over the bushing, and still it was a bear to get this thing in. I don't know, fooling around with that bushing, my little makeshift bushing press. I think it was really just easier to take a flat blade screwdriver, cover it with a rag, and you're basically deforming it to get into the first valley, and then it's even harder because now that's a really tight fit as it should be. Now you got to get it over that ridge into the second one. So be careful. I figured it would happen, and it did. The screwdriver slipped, caught me between the second and third finger, and that was not fun. Bleeding all over the car trying to get this thing installed. All right, so what does it look like on the car? Well, this is actually looking at the right side. The car is raised on jack stands. The wheels are removed, and that is a critical part of this because you are letting the suspension's now at full droop. Right, there's no weight on it. And you're removing all tension or torque off of and this is the sway bar, by the way. Um, and you have to do that. If you don't, you could do this installation feasibly on ramps, but you're going to preload unless it's just perfectly even, perfectly level. You're going to preload. You're going to put some preload on this on the sway bar. This is probably a better picture. This is looking from the rear toward the front of the car. Here's the fuel tank. More of the brake. This car has disc brakes. You can see my jack stand there, and there's the front tire. So this is looking forward, and you can see the degradation. You can see some cracking here from dry rot, and you can really see how the end link works. Here's the sway bar. If you don't know what a sway bar is, the absolute correct name for the component is the anti-sway bar or anti-roll bar. And the way this machine works, it's really a pretty marvelous machine. And for suspension design, it does just what it says. It counters natural body roll. So engineers can handle body roll one of two ways. They can either use stiffer springs in all 4 corners, which is you're gonna sacrifice ride quality, right? The stiffer the spring, the rougher the car is gonna ride. Or they can install a sway bar, which only works really during weight transfer, and specifically because of the weight transfer, the suspension compression. So the way this thing works, you see this bend, this 90-degree bend. Well, this makes the sway bar a lever now. So if the wheels were on the car and weight was on the suspension, you would not see this downward angle. This would be about level. So you're riding down the road and you turn the car, you turn the wheel to the left. So the weight's going to shift to the right. The suspension on the right side of the car, either front or rear, is going to compress as it loads up, right? Well, that upward movement on this lever, because of the sway bar, is transferred to the inside or the off side of the turn, and it helps counter because the suspension normally on the inside of the turn is going to unload as it shifts its weight over to the right. So the sway bar helps counter that. and counter the natural body roll or lean while cornering. And then as you straighten the wheels, you come out of the corner, the weight transfer equalizes or whatever it was to back up, to the four wheels, and this thing just rides happily down the road in its chassis mount, right? So that's the idea behind the sway bar. Well, you have to connect that lever to the suspension to make it work, and you do that through an end link. So I've already talked about the degradation of the bushing here. You can see the threads, the mounting bolt for the control arm. Here's the mount for the sway bar, and you see this upward angle. Well, that shouldn't be there, and that's because of this. Okay, that bushing is totally gone. And it's metal, metal to metal contact, and that, and I don't think I talked about that yet. That's actually the way it presents itself, is a clunking, clanking noise, whatever, from either one or both sides of in this case, the rear. So backing up and giving a little backstory on this, got the Contour about 3.5 years ago, 50 some odd thousand miles ago. And that was one of the first things I noticed about the car was this right rear clunking or clanking. And I've had it looked at by several shops and nobody could diagnose it. Now, in fairness, I thought it would be something in the exhaust line because I knew the seller had recently replaced the muffler at a muffler shop. So, and it wasn't an OEM muffler, and most of the time things don't fit exactly. It could have been a broken hanger or just an unconnected or disconnected hanger, something along those lines. Well, nobody could find it. Well, I didn't think much about it. Just, it was just one of those things I needed to look at, and I kept putting off for, 3 years. And I got the Cougar this year, and the Cougar had a lot of other problems, a lot of running problems that I had to sort out first before I got to this. And I'll do videos on those too. But I noticed a very, very similar sound coming from the right rear. So I'm like, well, that's got to be something common because the cars use the same platform, the CDW27 platform. So fish around on the forums, and oddly enough, too, the rear end links were mentioned even when I joined the forums as one of the trouble spots on these cars that, with the age and mileage, they're probably toast. So I finally raised the car and look, and this is, now with the wheels on, you're not going to see this extension, but I could see, some degradation on both sides, the dry rotting. So I'm like, well, that's what it's got to be. So I did the Cougar first, then did the Contour, and that's part of why this video is going to be so long, because I'm basically talking about a repair on two cars. So how do you fix it? Well, like I said, raise it, put it on jack stands, pull the wheels off, and you can do this whole repair. You don't even need to be under the car. You can do it from the wheel well. Before you break this nut or this fastener, break this one, because if you don't, then there's going to be nothing holding the end link still as you try to break this. Now the torque on both of these is not excessive. It's like 25 to 30 foot-pounds, I believe, from the Haynes manual. But they've been in a harsh environment, so now I broke this one with no problem. But I was using a 24-inch breaker bar and a deep well socket. You will need a deep well socket to get to it. I believe that's a 17 nut, and I think that's a 17 and that's a 15. So up here you'll need 2 wrenches or a socket and a wrench. Break this one first, then break this one, and I would leave them connected, go around to the other side, and then do the same thing, and then remove them. And that's what I was mentioning about the nice upgrade to the move part. It has a fitting for a wrench here, right? So you can hold it with a wrench while you break it with another one, and not put a lot of torque on this part. But in the end, you're replacing the whole end link, so if it broke, it really wasn't that big of a deal if I did twist it in two, and that's not overly um, um, hard metal, so I could see that it actually happening. And then when you reinstall it, after you get the fasteners broke, this pulls straight up. On this particular one, the bushing just fell apart. There was no bushing here, so the sleeve fell out. So if anything falls out, collect it, drop in. Well, then you get to do the fun part is forcing that new bushing down in this little mounting point. After you get the new bushing installed, the end link will slide right in. Go ahead and start your nut, start your fasteners. Um, I don't know which one. I don't remember which one I tightened first. I would get them all the new ones in place, and then start snugging everything down. You just don't want to put any torque or anything preload the sway bar. So that's the driver's side. Similar shot from. I'm sorry, that was the passenger side. This is the driver's side. Similar shot. You can see the eating away. Now, off on a bit of a tangent and back to the contour. So, well, and before I do that, there there are ways to and cheap and efficient upgrades. I've already mentioned that here. There, Energy Suspension also makes a two-piece polyurethane bushing because it's so difficult to get, I'm sure, a one-piece bushing in there. I considered the upgrade, but the way those bushings are constructed, they are tapered, right? So the narrow end goes in from the top and then from the bottom. Well, then you have a joint where they meet, and that's probably going to be where most of the stress is. So I really just shied away from that. And I didn't want to go the route of actually having to go get a bushing press, and I figured it would be a pain even with a bushing press to get it in there. Because with a bushing press, you still have to go around the circumference of it and kind of feed it down in there with a screwdriver. It's just it's just a big clamp basically. Um, so I shot away from the polyurethane on this one, and I figured, well, these are roughly 20 years old. If they make it another, if the new bushings make it another 20 or even another 10, then I'm good. However, I do wish, and I did check these bushings on both cars. They did appear to be in really good shape. I would strongly recommend, and I wish I had done that, replacing this rubber chassis mount bushing with a polyurethane bushing. It's a very simple fix or upgrade. It's just one bolt on these cars. The front side of this horseshoe shaped bracket is just a little hook, so you only have one fastener to loosen it. Get a little leverage. It's going to break loose. Use some penetrant if you want, and you could also use penetrant here. Um, this bushing is kind of horseshoe shaped. Maybe kind of hard to tell in this picture, but this surface here where it mounts to the chassis is flat, not rounded. Um, but there's a split made into the bushing during manufacturing, so you just slip the old bushing off, slip the polyurethane bushing in there, reposition the bracket, torque it down, and you're done. So what's the big deal about polyurethane? Well, it's a lot more firm. It's a lot firmer than rubber. In any suspension, there's natural slack and delay. When in that same example you get that left, now you're probably not conscious of it if you only drive on the street, and you may not. You're conscious of it, but you probably don't realize how much slack there is in your suspension until you do a simple upgrade like this. I competed in a '93 Honda Civic Si. That particular car, I think only the Si had any sway bar, and that was the front only. I may be wrong on that, but I know mine did. Um, I don't think the other Civic hatches even had sway bars at all. So I did this upgrade on that car, and the difference, even just street driving, was it makes your car, your suspension, much more crisp. It brightens it, and in competition, that little bit of lag, like you give your driver input, say, we're talking steering here. um, you with old tired rubber bushings, you usually find you've either given too much input or not enough, and it's usually, it takes it, probably not a full second, but it takes it a little bit for the suspension to actually load and settle. This little trick here, upgrading that, I'm sure it doesn't do away with 100% of it, but it does away with enough of it that you're like, wow, I didn't, really realize what the car could do. So these things are, I don't know, 5, 10, 15 bucks or something. They're really simple to install. So while you're under here, and I wish I had done that, I'd strongly recommend replacing this bushing with a polyurethane bushing. I'll put maybe some links to Energy Suspension. You can fish around for your application. And other manufacturers make them too. I've just always used Energy Suspension. So the story gets longer, right? With the mentioning this bushing, I did the end links themselves on both cars. The Cougar was fine. No other problems, no other noises, and it did crispen the suspension and did away with the clunk. The Contour, however, once I increased the efficiency of this machine, right, of the sway bar itself, I started hearing another noise. And I can't really say it's a click, clunk, clank, anything like that. And it was only present when the sway bar was loaded. So during cornering or, braking or something like that. And it sounded like the sway bar was moving around in this bracket. Okay, so there's not only rotational movement here, just the way the suspension works. There's going to be some fore and aft and some lateral, and all at the same time type movement in here. And even though they looked to be fine, and this one does too from the outside, there was clearly some wear. So I've increased the efficiency of the way the sway bar is working. So the next weak link was here. So yeah, I got to go under the Contour again and replace these bushings. Now, sadly, and the Contour is just a daily driver. I don't have any aspirations of competing in it. Um, but so I did go with rubber. Um, and between the two, yeah, the back end now, the rear end now works as it should, and it's a noticeable difference in the car. But the story continues. So now I've increased the efficiency of the rear sway bar totally by replacing both end links and both chassis mount bushings. And I start hearing a noise, kind of a clunking metallic noise from the front end. Okay. And it doesn't take long to diagnose that, especially with the help of the forums. And that was the front end link. As I mentioned, these cars have sway bars on both. And this thing looks totally different, right, than the rear end links. And it's just because of where the sway bar is relative to the suspension and so on and so forth. Now, this is actually the Moog product that I installed. This is just a stock photo. I didn't take pictures of this on the Contour. Um, and these work a little bit differently. And yeah, I guess the basic function is the same. The force is transferred via this rod. The connections actually are what's a little bit different. So you don't have the big thick bushing you have to compress, which is great. And the way these things work, these are actually these studs, these threaded studs, are actually a ball joint sitting in this cap, and it's packed with grease. And of course, these rubber boots keep the grease in. Well, the way these things fail, I mean, I guess they could break actually, but the way they typically fail is, the boot becomes dry rotted, splits or whatever. The grease dries out, and you're getting the metal to metal sound you're getting is actually the stud rattling or whatever, banging against the outside of this cap. Now, one of the differences, and of course I raise the car, pull the wheels, and I notice immediately the left side is not an original part. It's already been replaced at sometime in the car's life. But the right side was the original part, and they both used the original mounting methods. Another good thing about using the Moog product is that Moog actually improved the original mounting process. The originals and the replacement that used the original method have two nuts. They have the mounting nut, and then there's a lock nut that goes on this side of the bracket. And on this one, the process is kind of reversed. This mounts to the sway bar. This mounts to a bracket on the strut mount. So the sway bar is physically lower in the car than it is on the rear. But with the two nuts, then you have to use 2 wrenches. And I did read, several comments on the forums that, they had to grind a wrench down to get it in there and so on and so forth. I didn't have any problem. It's a little bit of wiggling to get it in there, but yeah, it's really not that big of a deal to get a wrench on that lock nut. But if you don't get a wrench on the lock nut, then the stud is simply going to spin and you won't get it off because it's a ball joint in there. So you have to hold that. The way Moog improved it, you notice the end looks hollow. Well, it's not hollow. It's a fitting for like a, 2.5 millimeter or so Allen wrench. So from the outside, you can't really use your ratchet because you got to hold this stud with the, hold it still with your Allen wrench. But you simply hold the stud with the Allen wrench and then tighten the fastener. I don't know of a polyurethane replacement. I don't see how it could be any benefit really here. So Moog, or I don't think you'll find a Ford part, but for whatever your car is, if you're hearing front end clunking or clanking or whatever, especially over bumps, that's probably the first place to start, and especially if your car is a little older and has some miles. Now, there's not a poly front end link that I know of as a replacement, but that front sway bar is also going to have a very similar mount to this kind of strap, whatever U-shaped, horseshoe-shaped mount. And again, that's what I replaced on the Civic that made so much difference. While you're there, the only thing on this car I did read, and I didn't replace that on the Contour either. And the only thing I replaced on the Cougar so far has been the end link. But I have heard there's clearance issues under there, maybe to get to this nut. So it's probably going to be a little harder to get to. You got the engine, you got the transaxle and everything, plus the firewall. But I would at least consider it. If you use original type like I did with rubber, but strongly consider it's a very cheap upgrade, and I think you'll be really amazed by the increase in your suspension's crispness. So that's about all I have. Not a hard fix, totally DIY, hand tools. Strongly consider upgrading to polyurethane, at least on this chassis mount. If you do it here and you got it in, either way, I'd love to hear from you guys. So please remember to like, share, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you soon with another video.